You wake up in the morning, stretch, and decide to check your phone. A few minutes later, you instinctively reach for coffee. Later in the day, you make a big decision, perhaps a career move, a relationship choice, or a financial commitment. It all feels deliberate. It feels like you are in control. But what if you're not? What if most of your thoughts, preferences, and actions were never truly yours to begin with? Cognitive scientists have long studied what shapes human thought, and the emerging conclusion is unsettling. Much of what we think is self-directed is actually the product of forces we barely notice. Biological programming, subconscious biases, social conditioning, and environmental triggers. In other words, your brain is not just yours. It is the sum of a lifetime of inputs, many of which you never consciously chose. In the late 2000s, researchers studying brain activity found something unexpected. Using advanced brain imaging, they could predict with up to 80% accuracy what a person would choose before the person consciously knew their own decision. This finding suggests that decisions emerge from deep within the brain before we ever become aware of them. While we experience the feeling of making a conscious choice, our brain has already done most of the work in the background. Even more fascinating, this unconscious processing happens not just in major life choices, but in everyday decisions, from what food you crave to how you react in conversations. This raises an unsettling question. If the thought you just had was generated before you were aware of it, who or what is really in charge? Most people assume their beliefs and opinions are the result of careful reasoning, but countless studies have shown that our surroundings, from the people we interact with to the media we consume, shape our thoughts more than we realize. A classic experiment demonstrated this effect in a simple way. Two groups of people were given a crossword puzzle to solve. One group's puzzle contained words related to aging, wrinkled, old, retired. The other had neutral words. After finishing the puzzle, participants were secretly observed as they walked out of the room. The first group, unknowingly influenced by the words they had processed, walked significantly slower, unaware that their brains had associated aging with physical movement. This is just one example of how external stimuli subtly program behavior. We are constantly shaped by cues we barely register. Advertisements, social norms, cultural expectations, all of which direct our thoughts before we have a chance to challenge them. Humans are wired for social belonging. This is why we tend to adopt the opinions, habits, and even speech patterns of those around us. But social influence extends far beyond personal interactions. In one striking experiment, participants were placed in a room with actors who were instructed to give obviously incorrect answers to simple questions. Shockingly, a majority of real participants conformed at least once, choosing an answer they knew was wrong just because everyone else had. Why does this happen? Our brains have evolved to prioritize social acceptance over independent thinking. At an unconscious level, disagreeing with the group can feel like a survival threat, triggering a deep-seated instinct to conform. This raises another troubling question. If many of our thoughts and opinions are shaped by those around us, how much of what we believe is actually a product of personal reasoning? If most of our thoughts are influenced by unconscious processes, does that mean we have no control over them? Not necessarily. While we may not be able to prevent our brains from absorbing external influences, we can become aware of them. The key is developing metacognition, thinking about our thinking. Studies have shown that people who actively challenge their assumptions, question their immediate reactions, and expose themselves to diverse viewpoints tend to make more independent decisions. This is why deep self-reflection, silence, and traditional spiritual practices like prayer and fasting have been used for centuries as tools to clear the mind from the constant noise of external programming. The The more we slow down and examine why we think the way we do, the more we can reclaim our thoughts from unconscious forces. So the question remains, how many of your thoughts are truly yours? If your brain begins processing decisions before you are aware of them, if your beliefs are shaped by invisible social and environmental pressures, and if your emotions influence what you accept as truth, what does that mean for your sense of self? Perhaps true freedom of thought is not something we naturally possess, but something we must consciously fight for.